This is a recap of Wednesday, October 21st. And we're going to start with a correction. And I have to thank Benjamin for it. And I'm going to show you the mistake that I made in helping with IXL. And then I'll show you his correction, or I'll show you the correction. And today's recap is really what I captured through helping with IXL today. So the lesson today was to go to the quiz that was due yesterday and make sure it's finished. So I will, before the recap is over, I'll make sure you know how to go there in case you missed today. But the main part of the recap today is going to be explaining the problem, the questions that people asked, and the solutions. So the first question that somebody asked was -3, and I think I'll mark in red so that it doesn't get mixed up. So here was the problem right here. -3/10 minus 2 1/5. And I'm just going to kind of show you the steps that I took. So step number 1 was to change -2 1/5 to this subtraction to adding the opposite. So that is what that looks like. We're going to change subtraction to addition and do the opposite of 2 1/5, which is -2 1/5. And notice how this part stays the same. It's still -3/10. But now it's an addition problem. Then we changed the mixed number to an improper fraction. And then the mistake that I made was I just totally ignored this 5 and just made it a 10 and said that it was -14/10, which was equal to -1 4/10, and which is -1 2/5. Sounds really reasonable, except for I forgot about this. So when he put it in, he got it wrong and then said what the correct answer was. So I came back and figured out that was my mistake and then redid it right there, finding a common denominator of 10, doubling the 11 to 22, and then adding the -3 and the -22 to get -25, and then changing it back to an improper fraction, and this was the correct answer of -2 1/2. So again, thank you for that correction, Benjamin, for bringing that to my attention. The next problem that I'm going to show you, these aren't in order by which they were done today, just the order that I have pictures of them. This is -2 4/5 minus a -3 4/5. So again, we're going to take that subtraction and do an equivalent addition problem. So adding the opposite of 3 4/5 is +3 4/5. So now this is positive. Whoops, let's go with the positive color, yellow. So this is positive, and this is positive, which means we're going to add them together. So we can do the 2 and the 3, that's 5. And then 4/5 and 4/5 is 8/5. This part is a bit of a problem. We don't usually write a mixed number with an improper fraction. So we take that part and we're going to take 8/5 and turn it into 1 3/5. That 1 goes with the 5, so it's 6 3/5. Okay, the next problem that we're going to look at is a fraction and a decimal. So we decided that we're going to, at the very beginning, change this fraction part right here to a decimal. So that's an equivalent. So when we say change, it has to be equivalent. So it has to be equal. So we can't change it to some decimal that's not equal. So 0.5 is equal to 1/2. Now we're going to take subtraction and write an equivalent addition problem. So we have to make that negative. So this is positive. This is negative. Whoops. Let's get the negative color. That means that we find the difference. That means that we're going to subtract. So that's why we're going to line up the decimal points right here and then do 5 minus 3 is 2, 9 minus 2 is 7. And the answer, there is more negative, so that's why we have a negative answer, negative 7.2. Let's go to the next one. And on this one, this is Miss Giggy's version of it. And then I think this is my version of it. Let's see, negative 2/10, negative 2 1/10 minus 7.5. And this is how Miss Giggy did it. So I'm going to explain how I did it first, and then we're going to take a look and see how she did it. So what I did was change the subtraction problem to addition. Oh, I see. Okay, sorry about that. There we go. So this becomes a, whoops, there we go, a plus, and then we have to find the opposite of 7 1/5. So, whoops, let me get this. This is a little confusing because I have a picture of the tool that I'm using. There we go. All right, so that becomes a addition problem of negative 7.5. I'll change negative 2 1/10 to negative 21/10. So what I'm gonna do here, I guess, is just use a different color pen because I've already written on this. Let's go with this blue, and I'm just gonna write the steps out. Step number 1, I changed it to an addition problem. Step number 2, I changed it from a mixed number to an improper fraction. Step number 3, I found a common denominator. Step number 4, I combined negative 21 or negative 73 and negative 21 to negative 93. And step number 5, I changed it to an improper fraction to a mixed number. And then looked to see if there was any way to simplify it, and there wasn't. So that's what I did to solve it. Let's look and see what Miss Giggy did. So Miss Giggy was nice enough to share with us how she solved it. And it looks like she found a common denominator. So she multiplied 10 times 1. Let me pull this out. Okay. Go back to red. Okay, so 10 times 1 equals 10. 1 times 1 equals 1. So 1/10 is equivalent to 1/10. And 1/5 changes to 2/10 by multiplying by 2. So then she wrote it as 7 2/5. So here's the change right here. And then she combined the 2 and the 7 to get 9. And she combined the 1 and the 2 to get 3. So that's a negative 9 3/10. So a different way of doing it, and really it was fewer steps. So let's look at the number of steps she had. Really, we'll call this one step here, and 2 steps. Well, it's really kind of, we'll call it 3, adding the whole numbers and adding the fractions. So she saved a step, a couple of steps. Nice job, Miss Gigi. And that brings up an interesting point. Looking at what I did was not incorrect, and what Miss Gigi did was not incorrect, but they were certainly different. So we have to start thinking about when we do something and why we do it, because there's different ways to get to the correct answer. So the most important thing right now is that what you're doing is correct and it makes sense to you. All right, this is help on IXL H11, and this is talk about number of steps. This is quite a few steps. So first step is right here. I think I'm going to go back to this color. Okay, step 1. Really, step 1 is right here. Sorry about that. It's right here. Step 1 is to change subtraction to adding the opposite. So plus, and the opposite of negative 6.5 is positive 6.5. Step number 2. Change this 6.5 to 13.5, so mixed number to improper fraction. Step number 3 is to write the negative in the numerator. Step number 4 is to change this to tenths, which is what I did right there, so that's step 4, and that's 65 tenths. Step 5 is to rewrite that as an addition problem. Step 6 is to combine a negative 9 and 65, you get 56. Step 7 is to rewrite that as a fraction. Step 8 is to rewrite it as a mixed number. And I think this is the one where period 1 said that is a lot of math. If we look at each one of these, it's true. But if we look at each one of the steps, they're not hard. But if you're going to do something with 8 steps and they all have to be correct, then it's easy to misstep. And the next one we're going to look at this is negative 6.3 plus negative 2.8. They're both negative, so we combine them together into a negative 8.8. We've got now 2 positives that we're going to subtract. So that means that we're going to find the difference. We're going to change them to improper fractions. We're going to change subtraction to an addition of the opposite. Again, I want you to notice how this remains oops. There we go. Nope, just a moment. This remains positive, while this subtraction, we change that to an addition of negative. So that's how that became negative. And then we find the difference between 81 and 29. It's 52. There's more negative, so it's negative, and then we change a mixed number to, or an improper fraction to a mixed number. Somebody asked for help on 8 minus a negative 9/10. That's the same as 8 plus I can change this from subtraction to addition as long as I do the opposite addition, as long as I do the opposite of this, which is positive. And that's 8 9/10. And this is the problem that's on the quiz today. If you want to take a look at it, and it is negative 7.5. And on the quiz it says 7.5, so that is a typo. That means that there's a mistake on card 14. Should have said negative 7.5. We're combining negative 3.9 with negative 3.6. So we have a negative, and more negative is yet even more negative. And the last one we're going to look at is negative 2 1/5 plus 6 1/5. So we change this to an improper fraction. I think I'm going to put the steps on here again. So there's step 1. Step 1 is to change a mixed number to improper fraction. The denominators are already the same, so step 2 was to combine, it's right here, step 2, 31 and negative 11. 31, negative 11, you get 20. And then step 3 is to simplify. And then we've got, so that was, oh, and then there was a really good question. How did we get this 11? Right there. So that is a really good question. How did we get 11? We did 5 times 2 plus 1. And then we drew a picture of that right there. So this is 5/5, this is 5/5, and this is 1/5. So that's 5, 10, 11. And they were all negatives, that's why it's red. So that's how we got negative 11/5. And then that was, let's see. This is a separate problem right here. Negative 3/10 minus 2 1/5. So step 1 is to add the opposite. Step 2 is to, oh, this is the mistake. This brings us back to the beginning. So this is where I changed the 5th right there. Just got changed to a 10 right there. And that was an error, an easy to make error. And if you go back to the very beginning of this video, that's what I fixed. All right. Last thing we're going to do is just take a look at, if you're watching this and you missed today and you want to know how to get to the quiz. So I'll just go to period 1, go to classwork, and make sure that you have done this quiz. The questions today were from IXL H11. We also did work on the CAMI, but we're going to finish that up tomorrow. And so I'm going to leave that off of today's recap because today's recap is long enough. So that is a recap for Wednesday, October 21st.